Welcome back, my four-armed, tentacled aliens, to
Want to Watch Now,
where we talk about what's streaming on Netflix right now. Now, this is something I wanted to talk about today because I just find it so fascinating. So, synonymous with the Disney name is brand recognition. It's as if they can do no wrong. They've never ever put out anything that's ever failed. Everything they do is the top grossing movie ever. But no. No. There's a few weird little gems that kind of, full on, $200 million gets put into the project. And for whatever reason, no one talks about that it didn't work out, or it's just forgettable, which is weird to think about. Because Disney does put out more than the just straight up cry sessions of Pixar or the princess movies or Marvel and stuff like that. They have a lot of other projects they are trying to create some originality. But unfortunately, go figure, originality isn't always easily as accepted as these iconic, like I said, princess movies and stuff like that. In fact, actually, if you're interested in failed Disney projects, there is an amazing podcast called Defunct Land, and the whole thing is centered around failed amusement parks in Disneylands, other Disneylands and Disney Worlds, which is so crazy to think that there's enough failed projects and ideas that fill up a whole podcast, 2 or 3 seasons. So pretty wild to think about. So today, I want to talk about John Carter. It came out in 2012. And right now I know you're thinking, John Carter? What the fuck is John Carter? Exactly. It didn't come out that long ago. It should sound vaguely familiar. And here I am, when I was digging through Netflix, I was like, what the fuck is John Carter? And I immediately got pulled in to see a shirtless Tarzan kind of man chained to a rock with a weird poop-looking monster, really CGI corny animated trying to go up and eat him. I was like, what the fuck is this? I have to watch it. So John Carter, I'm going to give you a quickie synopsis. Transported to Barsoom, a Civil War vet discovers a barren planet seemingly inhabited by 12-foot-tall barbarians. Finding himself prisoner of these creatures, he escapes, only to encounter Wu-La, and a princess in desperate need of a savior. And if you think, that sounds convoluted, oh, it's gonna get so much more convoluted, and I can't wait to tell you about it. The thing I will say, though, before going into this, was I was shocked how, maybe 20 minutes into the movie, I was like, fuck, I give a shit about these aliens. I'm, in this. The cinematography is great. I don't think the writing is that terrible at all. It's a kind of great movie you should totally watch. And it should be considered a great movie because it was written by Andrew Stanton, who, if you're not familiar with his name, he wrote and directed this. He did A Bug's Life, WALL-E, Finding Nemo, Finding Dory, and a ton of other iconic Disney projects. So it's crazy they gave him the free rein to do whatever he wanted, and he came up with this creative idea. Also, this movie has an insane level of notable names that you're like, Bryan Cranston? Willem Dafoe? I mean, the list goes on and on of being like, what the fuck are you doing here? And why are you a four-armed CGI alien? Okay, so let's get into, John Carter and what it is, and the positives and the negatives, all that jazz. I will say right off the bat, I think it was fucking a weird idea that they named it John Carter, because, it, even after watching the movie and becoming familiar with it, it doesn't really feel like it is about John Carter, even though he is the central protagonist. It doesn't, you know what I mean? There's a weird skip or a hiccup of, it doesn't make sense is what I'm saying. It feels out of place, you know what I mean? It's To Kill a Mockingbird isn't called Atticus Fitch. Does that make sense? They're trying to make it seem like a superhero type thing. I don't know. So I'm going to start it up with the general setup because it's really important. It's told from the perspective of a flashback through a story. Essentially, John Carter is very wealthy. He sends a telegram out. We're going to call him his nephew. But I think he just might be a distant relative. It's not really clear. But that gentleman who plays his nephew is Daryl Sabara, or iconically the Spy Kid, and also he is also Meghan Trainor's husband. So like I said, just a menage of random people in this movie. Anyways, he is contacted to come visit John Carter, but when he visits, to his surprise, his uncle has dropped dead. And his uncle is relatively young, so it's weird he would die of natural causes. And he is given everything, his estate, his inheritance, and also a book that only he can view. No one else can. So he starts reading the story, and in the story, his uncle implies that in the past he told him about his wild adventures, and he was so kind to believe him. But if he could just believe him one last time, because I guess in the past he only gave him like little quick tales, not the whole story as a whole, and being like, to the God's honest truth, this is what happened, this is my story. So it's really important to note that he is somewhere dead, and that his nephew's reading this book. So now we're going to go into I'm going to tell you right now, the aliens and the places have names, but I'm not going to say them. I'm going to give them kind of nicknames, because the one flaw in this movie, I'm okay with the fact that it's so convoluted of a plot line. There's a lot going on. I don't think that's a negative thing. It's that the names, whoever was like, again, Andrew, who was writing this screenplay, are so, like, they're not thought out at all, that at times the person, Taylor Kitsch, who plays John Carter, you can tell he feels stupid acting saying the names. I think if he gave them, like in Avatar, I thought they gave pretty good alien names for the species and different things like that, so people felt serious expressing these feelings and expressing these ideas. But literally in this movie, it's like the Wuta, the thwart. Like, there isn't a lot of thought here. So John Carter, in the flashback, was a poor gentleman at this time in his life. He had survived the Civil War, and it really fucked him up. We learn later in the film that he went off to war, and when he came back, his wife and his young daughter, who I was probably like 1.5, 2, something really sad, died in a house fire. So his house burned down, his family died. It was really sad. And you get this idea that he's forever scarred by not only losing his family and has trouble connecting to people, but he hates this idea. He thinks war in general is pointless, and he's constantly internally fighting with himself, which I think they did a really good job capturing the idea of like being a good person and not wanting to see people struggle, but the emotional turmoil that war has on people. And I think everyone can agree, it's like you go and you save your fellow man, but then you feel so complex about like killing other people and being caught up fighting other people's like conflicts and stuff like that, because at the end of the day, that's really what war is above anything. I mean, well, we're not going to get into that. Don't just gloss over what I just said. So he doesn't want to fight for anyone, but he definitely has like a natural ability to, kind of bring people towards him. People naturally want him to lead, and he's having to deal with that the whole movie. And I love their conclusion with how he overcomes that. So he is out forging for gold, and from day one we get introduced with that concept with Bryan Cranston playing like a Confederate general, which I just thought was so fucking funny. He in like an all blonde crazy wig and like a mustache. I was like, 2012, wasn't Breaking Bad going on at this time? Like, what a wackadoo side role to play. Because like Jensen Ackles from Supernatural, the only like other movie he did at the time that he was doing Supernatural, they pretty much the boys only focus on Supernatural, is he did My Bloody Valentine, and that just seems like a typical kind of like offshoot horror movie, which makes sense. But I also found out that it's actually an iconic older kind of OG 1960s horror movie, so it's actually like really cool that he was in the remake, so it still makes sense with his like choice of career moves. With Breaking Bad, I'm sure he's pretty well known. I know he would like to be like associated with a Disney project, but I couldn't help but be like, this is weird. You see that this is weird, right? But anyways, everyone's giving it their all. I do want to point this out. So he gets poached to try to be like, hey, fight for us. And this is the thing that I think genuinely worked for me and made me laugh the whole movie is John Carter keeps telling everyone to fuck off, and no matter how much they're like, no, we feel you, we can tell you're a good person, and they take punches in the face space or lots of fighting. He just does not care how big of a hole he digs himself. He is not going to do what you want him to do. And it's not in a cute, like, oh, it's Kate from Lost. She just does what she wants type of vibe. Which, by the way, I love fucking Kate from Lost. By the way, this is like a side note. Rewatching Lost, I didn't like Kate the first time I watched her. And now looking back, she's like one of the nicest, most actually helpful, less selfless characters than I had remembered seeing the first time. So cool. But I want to do like a whole Lost podcast series on the Patreon. So I have a Patreon if you want to become a supporter today and listen to some of our secret podcasts, the Mystery Cipher. I've got a bunch of cool stuff I've been posting over there. Please consider becoming one today. And don't forget to subscribe, guys. So anyways, through a chain of events, he's able to eventually escape this guy, and he's led to a tunnel where he's hoping to find his gold and his fortune. And this tunnel looks like it's potentially inhabited or is somehow associated with Native American lore, but we see that the Native Americans do not want to have anything to do with this place. And when he goes there, he ends up running into, we're going to call them the Baldies. This is a bald alien in a big ceremonial cult robe, and he's got a cool, shiny, kind of little Orphan Andy decoder type silver thing he's going to use. And John Carter accidentally hits it, uses it, and teleports to Bonsoon, or basically Mars. He teleports to Mars. And this is where I thought was really creative. So where he gets his kind of claim to fame, everyone being interested in him, is his relationship as a human to the planet and its gravity. It's such a cool idea. Because there's a couple different species going on. We've got the Baldies. Nobody knows they're there, but they're there. They're a type of alien species that exist on practically every planet. Then we have the four-armed avatars. These big guys, they're green. They kind of take the role of being like the Native Americans on the planet. It's kind of their vibe of what they're kind of being associated with. And then they're called, I do remember these ones are called like the red ones or the red people. And these essentially are just straight up humans with little red face tattoos over their body or whatever. But that being said, everybody's been born on this planet. So when John comes, his like bone density and stuff is lighter or different. And he's able to jump incredibly high, kind of like you would on the moon, and fall down decently quick. It's kind of an interesting schematic. So it enables him to jump at incredible speeds and have a huge advantage over other people. I mean, imagine on Earth if someone could jump like a kangaroo over a 3-story building at will all the time. And in addition to that, like the way his bones work and stuff like that, if he wants to, and he wants to throw a punch really hard, he could kill someone in one single punch. So with someone who already has combat experience and can genuinely fight as a war hero, mixed with some weird gravity situation things he learns to master really quickly, it's like, yeah, fuck. Like he's quite a little warrior that everyone immediately gets kind of fascinated and bewitched by. By the way, it does make me laugh that he goes from like, so in the beginning, he's like trying to jump and he keeps falling on his face. And you're like, oh, I love this. This makes sense. He's trying to understand the world around him. But eventually he's able to walk pretty normal. I think it would have, this is just like a side note. Obviously it'd be already too expensive to fuck with his gravity even more. But it would make more sense if on the regular when he was walking, there was a kind of, you know, always a slight hop effect to him. And then when he wanted to hop higher, you know, he could do that. So this is where the causes start to come in. He gets picked up a couple different times by different aliens. He gets initially picked up by the four-armed avatars, and it's really interesting because their chief right away can sense that he looks and feels differently than the red ones. And he's fascinated with the idea of him jumping, but every time he gives him a chance, John Carter's like, I'm not fucking having it. I'm not going to do what you want me to do. I don't give a shit if you kill me. I don't give a shit about anything. I'll ask my wife and daughter. I couldn't care less. I just want my gold, and I want to go back to Earth. And then at times, he meets a girl. May I mention, she's the fucking whole reason. Like, the whole movie's carried on her back, I might add. And she wants him to fight for her. And he's still like, listen, girl, I'm into you, but like, really, I'm not going to fight a war for you. I'm sorry, I don't know these people. I don't know this cause. And this continues on and on and on. I think it's, like I said before, I found it really refreshing that it never got boring to watch. Like, it never became repetitive. it just made a lot of sense. Like, who the fuck wants to get involved with war in general? Like, if they can choose it. Like, most people just do it for financial reasons and, like, the fact that, you know, maybe their family was into it, so it becomes, like, kind of an honorable profession that they feel like they're naturally inclined towards, you know, and stuff like that. But most people, like, don't desire to, like, murder other people. You know, that's not the goal. They just believe in the idea of, like, you know, freedom and supporting the ones they love and care about and protecting their country and stuff like that. So it makes sense that he's like, girl, this ain't my fucking home. This is Mars, Bonsoon, whatever you want to call it. I'm from Earth. Get me back to Earth the whole time. I found that really refreshing. So during this time, we get a little background knowledge on, like, why is everyone fighting? What's the deal? So the four-armed aliens aren't involved in anything. As far as they're concerned, the red man can go, you know, fight each other out. They don't give a shit. But what the bigger cause is that when this fighting goes on, eventually the leading red men are going to turn their attention towards the four-armed avatars. That's going to slowly become a thing. So it is their problem. They're just unaware of it is their war to fight. Kind of not unsimilar to, like, John Carter's perspective, which is really interesting. Man, being a leader must be fucking hard as hell to, like, know when to put your people in danger for the right reasons or not. So essentially what happens is there's two different, like, tribes or groups of red men. And one of those have been given a technology from the Baldies, secretly, that creates him to be kind of, like, indestructible it's like a super weapon, like, attached to his arm. And he is successfully beating up this other city called Helium. And he's trying to control everything and gain control. But he's getting a lot of secret political advice from these Baldies. Now, if you're asking about these Baldies of, like, what do they play, what's their part, they have, like, intense technology where they can change the way they look, they can make you be silent, they have these, like, OG Apple Watches that do everything, and they harness this ability through the ninth ray. It's like another form of electricity, superpower, whatever. And they disguise themselves and are successful. It's very Game of Thrones-esque in this way, but they are able to come across as, like, a run-of-the-mill soldier, an old lady, whatever they need to, but all the while they are privately, like, they'll pick someone, give them this power, and help orchestrate wars. What I thought was so cool about them is you think, why would they choose this idiot who is clearly, like, you know, into genocide and just, like, a madman in general? It's because he's dumb and he's easy to manipulate. And you learn that they don't control every single group or every single tribe, but on every planet, they are in multiple tribes manipulating their leaders, coming across as just yet another alien or another red man, blending in, and little do you know that they are truly the power forces behind everything, which I just think is such a cool concept. And we'll get into their, like, motivation in one moment. But what's happening is, while these wars are going on, we have a girl, a princess of Mars or whatever, and she's the princess in Helium. And you learn that her father, because he's a fucking dick, I'm surprised she's never liked dad. Like, I wish in one movie, when the dad sells his daughter out for the sake of stopping a war, the daughter would turn to her dad and just straight up be like, I fucking hate you. You do know I'm about to be, like, assaulted and captured and my opinions... Stop telling me you love me. You clearly don't. You're a piece of shit. And he wants to basically marry her off to try to stop the war and piece everything out. Little does he know, the ultimate plan is to gain control of their city through marriage, but after that, he's just gonna, like, pretty much, like, do whatever he wants. There's not truly going to be peace. It's just only going to be more control. But she obviously doesn't want to marry him for the sake that she doesn't like this man. That's understandable. But she's actually... This is where it gets really interesting. So, the princess is one of the most likable characters in the whole movie. She is a phenomenal actress. Her name is Lynn Collins, and she plays Deja Thoris. And Lynn Collins is so emotional and has so much depth. She looks like Xena the warrior princess, but she's not only smart and able to fight in war, which makes her really attractive. She's like a badass. She's a scientist. It's clear that there are sexist beliefs on this planet, and she's doing something kind of... It makes me think of this. There's a specific astrologist who got unfortunately stoned later in her life. Like the way she passed away was being stoned. It was during the Greek time... not the Greek time period. It was in Greece, is what I'm saying. And during this time period, she made some of the biggest discoveries that we came to later be known about. Like, oh, this is how our planet is in relationship to other stars and stuff like that. So it very much made me think she was modeled on that type of person. And she is great because when she doesn't want to marry him, she is doing it because she's aware of the politics. She's aware, it's more, I mean, of course she doesn't want to be silenced as a person, but she is truly a leader and aware of the tactics, and she's not dumb. She's aware that when she's more concerned that she is the last final key, that if she marries him, it isn't going to equal peace. She even says, I would fucking suck it up and do it, which is a lot to ask of any human being. I would endure this relationship if it meant peace, but I know it doesn't. I know he's just going to have more control, and I think this will not only hurt my city, but she is aware of how important it is to progress and grow. She, in fact, is so smart. She's almost so close. The aliens stop it, but she almost successfully figures out how to harness the power of the ninth ray herself, which to everyone else is just but a myth. It's kind of interesting, though. This is like a side note that I thought was cool. Even though we have all these different cultures going on and they have all their, you think they'd have all these different separate beliefs, they actually all believe in the same gods. And at one point, they even think that, what's it called? That John Carter might be one of these. So they have these like in their religion. Like I said, it's a very convoluted plot, but stay with me here. They have like an ultimate god. I think her name is Is, goddess. And in between, there are these superior beings that are like the messengers. And the Baldies are sometimes described as these Therns, is what they're called. But in reality, the whole religion is bullshit. The Baldies are kind of like the messengers or the main ruling race in a way, the way they go about it. But the whole religion is just like a convoluted subplot to control people. Again, it's really interesting how much John Carter gets into like the practicalities of like religion and politics. I thought the whole thing was so interesting. So we have these two people fighting it out. We have a third race just doing their own thing, keeping separate, protecting themselves, but ultimately they couldn't give a shit. At one point they're even like stadium style, like watching some of the red men fight, and they're just like having bets and stuff like that, which I thought was really funny and dark. And ultimately, our girl from Helium, what's her name again? Deja, she sees John Carter potentially having this ability to help her defeat and stop this thing. And she's trying to convince him. What ultimately happens is his mind is changed as he builds these connections. And this is what's so cool and important. He never starts fighting for anyone because he gives a shit about war again, or he found his fighting spirit. I love that he actually, to me, stayed true to that idea because he thought it was still bullshit. There was never a changing of opinion in that way. But I think the biggest lesson to be learned is, unfortunately, after his wife and daughter died, he lost all connection to any humans. He had no desire to give any respect. And through a series of events, he came to build a close connection with the chief, played by Willem Dafoe, and his secret daughter, Sola, by the way, played by Samantha Morton, who you know as like Alpha from Walking Dead. I was like, what the fuck is she doing here? She really killed it. And you see him building these emotions and interactions with people and learning to open up again. So when he goes to rescue Helium, he goes to rescue the chief, he goes to rescue his daughter, he's not doing it for the act of fighting or for the war. He just has a different perspective of individually wanting to fight for these people. That's his main cause, his main reason. And I would still say he strongly believes in the idea of not fighting with people for the sake of war, because it feels like when he goes to fight people, he's so superpowered and strong on this particular planet that he's in a position. Sorry, I'm getting a phone call. He puts himself. I'm so sorry, that messed up my train of thought. He can take on so many people at once, is what I'm trying to say, that in a way he's aware that he can put less people in danger just by being the leading force in whatever battle he needs to do, which is so cool and interesting. And he ultimately does save our girl Deja. He saves the other aliens. Everything's great. He almost takes down one of the Baldies, but he isn't successful in that moment. I mean, it's crazy. Like, at the very end, he breaks up this wedding. Right then and there, marries Deja. He sleeps with her. He has this happy, positive relationship. He's literally the king of Mars, and everyone supports him. He's even built, by accident, this unity between all the different groups of people, and it's really positive. Everything's amazing. And then at the last possible second, the alien that got away pops up out of nowhere and forces him to be forced back to Earth. So the whole movie's a flashback. And you might say, wait a minute, I'm totally sucked into the Mars story. Wait, that's just over? He just accidentally ditched his new waifu and he's back and then he died on Earth? I don't understand. No. This is where the last kind of convoluted idea that I kind of love that they did. Like I said, it's a very dense movie that you can totally follow, but I was okay with all of it. Like, normally I'm like, oh my god, Jesus, this is a lot to take in. So what happens is, after he gets transported back to Earth, he starts to understand how this whole teleportation thing works. He doesn't have a device to teleport back, unfortunately, so he's not able to get back to this person he loves, this new identity he's built, which is, like, terribly fucked up, I might add, after all the trauma he's already experienced. But he soon becomes more focused on not just gold, but specifically finding, because these aliens exist everywhere, including Earth and different parts of Earth. He becomes almost like Indiana Jones, specifically seeking the ability to teleport or transport back to Mars. That becomes his whole obsession in his more like, we'll say like 25 to 35 type vibe. And this is where the stories came through that he told his little nephew about, and so on and so forth. So he ends up concluding in the book and series that became his new obsession. This is like all in the last 10 minutes of the movie. And that he explains that when he died, this is why he had such a weird, convoluted way of, like, his funeral arrangements. Like, a mausoleum that can only be opened from the inside. A secret coding. And he starts to explain that the way the whole teleportation thing works in Mars is your copy of yourself that almost seems like it dies, which isn't dead, goes, stays on Earth while you go to Mars. So in fact, when he's implying that when he goes to the mausoleum, he will most likely being chased by aliens who are probably still seeking him, wanting to take him away from his ability to find out about their technology, being able to teleport back, all that stuff. They don't want anyone to have control. And it's kind of implying that he's still alive in the mausoleum, but he had figured out how to find a device and he had been transported. So it looked like he died, but he didn't, type thing. And so the nephew runs over to the mausoleum, and this is what's so great. When he figures out how to get into the mausoleum, and he right then opens to see his uncle, not only is his uncle not there, this is John Carter, but an alien is right about behind him, about to kill this kid, about to kill John Carter himself, just like John Carter had predicted. And John Carter pops up, sneaks up, kills the alien. And this is what happens. He basically explains that he was on purpose making it seem like he died so that the alien would hunt him down and he could get the alien close enough to him to then steal his transporter. But he used a serum of puffer fish or whatever. And fun fact about pufferfish, by the way, interestingly enough, the pufferfish, you have to have, I only know this because I used to work at a sushi restaurant. You have to have a certificate to work with sushi, but being able to work specifically with pufferfish is a whole nother certificate program, because if you do it wrong, you can poison people. So it's like a whole way of removing the egg sac or the ink sac that has the poison in it. That takes such skill and education, because obviously you want to be able to do this regularly and not murder people. So he did this, he took the serum to make it look like he's dead to bring the alien in, but now that he can teleport himself and whatever, he basically tells the nephew, listen, you're going to be my protector. I'm going back in the mausoleum. It is going to look like I'm dead, because if I die on Earth, I'll die on Mars. So I need you to basically protect my body so I can go back to Mars. And in exchange, you get all this wealth, this inheritance, all this positive stuff. You can totally enjoy your life. And he even suggests him to say, go enjoy your life. You could still protect me and go, date a girl, meet someone. I think it's almost like his way of talking to himself, because when he was through a more desperate time in his life, he didn't live. He didn't want to move on. And I think it's kind of his way of passing on to the nephew that advice. But I thought that was really funny because I'm like, dude, your nephew's not going through the trauma you previously experienced. I don't think he really needs that advice. You just give him a shit ton of money. I think he'll know how to spend it. So it ends with him saying he's going back home to Mars. So now he has a home. Hopefully his wife who hasn't met get married. I want John Carter too, and she's remarried and it's awkward as fuck. She's gonna go back to his home. Maybe potentially he has kids there for all we know. And he's gonna go be the king and blah da 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 da. It's all this jazz. And I wonder if time moves differently on Mars, and maybe his wife is a lot older. I'm so curious about all that jazz. I don't know enough about like the physics in that way with time moving, but what was I gonna say? Sorry, my brain's like dying here. Oh, so anyways, that is John Carter. I thought it was actually a great movie. I was surprised it was a Disney movie with the amount of sexuality and the choices they made, but it was still really well written, well acted. It was fun. I genuinely suggest you should go watch it, and I genuinely suggest you should take time to subscribe to this podcast. Please tell a friend so you can help this podcast grow, and consider becoming a Patreon supporter today. I got a bunch of awesome original content only on there that I think you would totally enjoy. And also, I'm actually, when I get 200 Patreon supporters, I want to open up a Discord and have us all have like monthly movie hangouts where we all come hang out at once and watch the movies live at once. So you should totally go do that because I think it would be really fun. Anyways, guys, I hope you have a wonderful day. I will talk to you in the next podcast. I love you in the most platonic way possible. Bye!